Oops.
Sunday, May 12th, 2024. Happy Mother's Day. Welcome back to another live stream of the Honeycomb Podcast. Thank you for being here with us as always. We got some subject matter lined up today around the latest improvement proposals. We'll talk about active versus passive driving, market conditions, governance, and whatever you'd like to talk about in the chat. Send us your questions, your thoughts. We'll try to work it in with the overall flow of the podcast. As always, this is not intended to be financial advice. You should consult with a trusted professional before acting on any information you may hear. And as always, do your own research. What's stated here is not the opinion of the official Hivemapper team or Hivemapper Foundation, just ours as participants in this ecosystem. Brad, how you doing?
I'm doing great, man. It is beautiful in Chicago right now. We're coming up on summer, which is the best time to be in Chicago. We kind of deal with the winters to be here during the summers, frankly. So, yeah, man, I'm doing pretty well. I had a pretty solid week. I got 22 dash cams added to my fleet and 45 demo units out, one to a Turo fleet and one to another fleet here in Chicago. So
very nice.
Yeah, been a productive week. And I got the MIP 14 video out too. So
yeah, I did watch those videos. They're tremendous.
Thank you.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, what overall, what are your thoughts, since you have a sizable fleet, a very large fleet, really? Thoughts that over these past weeks, months, with the recent changes?
Yeah, I mean, so I think a lot of the MIPs, I understand the thought process behind them. If you watch my MIP 14 video, I think they made a pretty drastic change. Now, so going to like regional progress, each region is graded based on their progress towards the map, right? And all the regions scores add up to your global progress score, which is ultimately how the number of tokens is determined per week to be distributed globally. So they're going to continue raising the bar there over time. And I think with MIP 14, they made some pretty big jumps. They call it adjusting the curve. I would like to see, more frequent raising of the bar, but in smaller increments to kind of levelize out the rewards, because I think we saw a pretty big drop off in rewards week over week. We've seen them start to recover, obviously. As they continue to add more regions, though, that's going to counteract some of that. So, I think they've over adjusted maybe a little bit. And I do wonder about the fact that they're so obsessed over the active versus passive mapping thing. Like, I will say, I would not get into this project if you're planning on active mapping. Okay. But for those that don't know what the difference is, active mapping would be going out to drive for the sole purpose of mapping for Hivemapper. We are in crypto, so it's very volatile. So we might have weeks, maybe a couple months, where the price of honey goes up so much that economically it might make sense for a short period of time, but it's not sustainable. So I would not recommend getting into this project, not financial advice, if that is your goal, is to use your time specifically just to drive for Hivemapper. But one of the things that I'm seeing and I'm wondering about is the team making decisions on the MIP, with that in mind? Like, are they trying to dissuade people from active mapping? And if that's the case, I fundamentally do have an issue with that, because if you're trying to prevent someone's motivation for something, you have to look at what their motivation is. And for active mappers, it's not the amount of honey hitting their crypto wallet every week. It's the dollar value of what's hitting their wallet every week, because they're obviously looking at this as a means of income if they're actively mapping. And you're inherently then taking market conditions into consideration if that's your goal, is to dissuade that type of activity. So, I know the team said we're not going to make changes based on market conditions, but if you are making changes to prevent people from actively mapping, I think you are inherently taking market conditions into consideration. So my fundamental problem with that is, if you put out MIP in place and that's part of your motivation behind the changes you're making, what happens if you see a 50, 60, 70% correction in the market? Well, all of a sudden the impact of the changes you just integrated is 3 to 4 times what you intended, and it could result in an overcorrection. So, I don't know that they are for a fact taking that into consideration, but if they are, I think they should stop, because you might get lucky and predict market conditions a couple times, but the market's going to win, especially in something as volatile as crypto. So I would just stress, focus on the things, and I think they are focusing on the right things, where get dash cams shipped, get the B in full production and get it shipped, make the process more passive, and then work on getting a product that you can sell and revenue through the door. The market will take care of the active versus passive mapping thing. I think they need to stop worrying about that so much, because now I get from their perspective, they're like, well, if someone's actively mapping, then what happens when, it's not sustainable, they're going to stop mapping. Well, I would argue that they'll either give it to a friend that's on the road a lot, and then it's in the hands of an active mapper and they'll split the rewards, or they'll sell in the secondary market. I know Ariel loses sleep over the thought of secondary market sales, but market conditions also dictate the price of the secondary market, so, if the market comes back down to earth, like we've seen over the last couple of months, you'll see the secondary market prices will fail. And the people that'll buy the dash cams in the secondary market are your Uber and Lyft drivers, your sales road warriors, the people that you want to be mapping anyway. So again, I think market conditions will take care of that. And I think it's going to be a small subset of the community anyway. Most people will be passively mapping. If it is, even 10% of your mappers are actively mapping, we all know it's not sustainable. And I don't think it's going to have like a huge impact on individual region progress if one camera ends up being shipped to another region. So I would stress that they stop worrying so much about that, and just, worry about the things that they should be focused on. And I think things would be a lot better off if they did that.
Yeah, I agree with your statement there pretty much entirely. I don't know that what they're adjusting these metrics based on is necessarily active versus passive mapping. It may very well be based on some statements we've heard from them. And the way Ariel spoke about why he doesn't like active mapping in the podcast we did with him, I believe his reasonings are pretty sound. But as you said, you really can't worry about, in a massively distributed system where there's so many variables, and geographically you have totally different conditions, you're bound to have, at any given point, you're going to see that fluctuate. It'll be drastic in some cases, and you can only hope the market takes care of it. And for example, we're going to see, some of these third world countries where what is worth a couple dollars here in the US is worth a day's worth of work over there. So they're going to be driving up from sun up to sundown to get rewards. That's like a factor that I look at. And in the past, that I went out and actively mapped, when in the Chicago area you had both unmapped roads and you still had the first time map, plus what the rewards payout looked like at the time. Yeah, that was an outrageous amount of money that you can't pass that up. I find it to be kind of ridiculous overall. Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily like to see that kind of situation that causes this rage and mania, and plunge of, I shouldn't say plunge, just this massive pickup in people who want to contribute in the system with unrealistic expectations. I don't think it's good for any crypto system. But it's also, on the other hand, I want to know from your perspective, let's say you do deter the rewards, or you kind of adjust the rewards in a way that active mapping is not necessarily worth it. So you want to cater to passive mappers. And this is going to affect everyone across the board, rewards wise. Does it make you, there's so many conditions that you have to deal with as a fleet manager that are unknowns, that are liabilities that you have to account for. When does it become not worth it from your standpoint, or maybe your driver's standpoint?
Yeah, I inherently disagree with any type of MIP decision that's based on active versus passive mapping. I think it's I disagree with it, because again, you're taking market conditions into consideration then. And what are you going to do every time the market pumps? If we get into a bull run, every time we see, the price of honey go up, they're going to adjust it. And then what happens when the market corrects and they've over adjusted. So if the MIP, and I think a lot of the MIPs, okay, in fairness, if it's to, hey, we need to balance rewards now versus future contributors, sure, that's looking out for the long-term viability of the project. That's not taking into consideration the price of honey, okay? Or if it's, hey, we need to get more progress in some of these regions and raise the bar to continue pushing the project forward, I'm all in favor of that. But again, if there's any decision making that's, hey, we need to prevent active mapping, well, then you're looking at how much drivers are making per week on a dollar standpoint, not honey tokens, and then you're definitely taking market conditions and the price of honey into consideration. And we've seen this, right? The Coinbase listing happened. It got up to like 34 cents, right? And post Bitcoin halving, we've seen a broader market pullback. That's very normal. Most DePIN projects have had a substantial pullback. I mean, that happens. If you look historically, this happens every time after a Bitcoin halving. So I'm not surprised. And I think, honey did like a 30x, right? So we've seen a broader pullback in a larger pullback in this project. I'm not surprised by that at all. But, if they made decisions to prevent active mapping back when honey was 34 cents, well, now we're at 8 cents. So whatever changes they made, is the impact's been 4 times what they intended back when the price was at 34 cents. So again, I think they should stop trying to make changes that take into consideration honey price, assuming they have. I'm not, they haven't said they had, but kind of drawing, the dots or connecting the dots, it seems like maybe that's happened. So to answer your question, like at what point does it make sense to contribute? Well, I've been very selective in the fleet that I've put together, right? I have very specific types of drivers that are on the road a lot during the day, driving differentiated routes. And I've been very happy with my fleet build out, right? But if you're not driving much, then you're probably not going to be excited about this project. So, I think it really depends on what type of driver you are. And region and location certainly makes a difference as well. But I think, even if you're not actively on the road a lot, you can still participate in this project. Like I don't drive that much. And there was like a 5-month period where I had, 70 dash cams in my fleet, and I didn't even have one in my own car. Okay. Like I had it out with a driver because it was better for me to do a 50-50 split than, for me to have it in my own vehicle. So that just goes to show, like, if it's the right type of driver, I think it makes a lot more sense. I do have one now, but it's not a financial decision. It's so that I can create content. I can understand the firmware updates. I can have hands-on with that. I can help drivers in my fleet troubleshoot by having my own dash cam and understand what they're going through. But it's only for that reason. It's not, a financial decision, because I don't drive enough, even in Chicago in a high value region. But yeah, I mean, you can obviously, not financial advice, you can buy the token. I mean, you need to do your own research and decide what you want to do there. You can do QA. But if you partner with the right type of people, like I'll give a shout out to Andre and Cosmin, 2 guys that I've been working with their fleet of vehicles. And you partner with the right type of people, you can have a lot of fun in this space, but you just have to be strategic about it. That's all.
Now, your thought process is that MIP 14 was too heavy-handed overall. What are you basing that on? I'm curious.
Well, let me share my screen here. How do I share just a?
You hit present, and then you have to add it to you hit present, share screen. You got to select the screen, whether it's the browser tab or the window, and then you have to add that in.
Got it. Boom. Okay. And then I got to add it up there.
Yep.
Okay. So, this is really what I'm talking about. So we saw the rewards go from, again, global progress is what determines how many honey tokens are distributed throughout the globe for that week every Thursday.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really a combination of all the different individual regions grades, if you will. And you kind of get this like global score, group project grade, and that determines how many tokens are distributed. So we went from 5.5 down to 4, million tokens. So, that's like I believe, if my math's correct, there's like a 37% decrease week over week. To me, that seems too drastic. And I did call out in my MIP 14 video. They also, on the other end, we've had events where it went up by a substantial amount. Obviously, no one was complaining when the token rewards doubled back here, back in March 2023. But I think having changes that drastic is not good for the overall ecosystem. I would like to see more stability, because people are making these decisions based on rewards. Obviously, they're dynamic; they can change. But I look at it as moving the goalpost more so than raising the bar when you have that big of a change. And so I wonder. My question is, and why I think it's too heavy-handed is, it's too drastic to have an unscheduled token event have that much of an impact. But it also opens the door for a lot of FUD in the community. And I said this in my video. I used to see this in my consulting job where, I worked in the solar industry. We would talk to the operations team, and they say, well, it's weird that on certain projects, just everything seems to go wrong. And we'd look at the details and we identify that, hey, something happened early in the project. It wasn't fixed. The homeowner or the customer was upset. And then every other little issue became a much bigger issue. Now we're seeing this, right? Where rewards got messed with so drastically that, firmware updates aren't perfect, right? And shipment delays are out there. And now everyone's like, oh, this project is, throwing crazy stuff out there, like fudding, the shit out of the project. But it's because, you do something this drastic and then every other little thing is going to be under the microscope. So I would like to see, if you look at the changes they made, this is the result. Now we have seen, I want to call this out, region progress. Now that they've raised the bar for these region grades, we saw it recover. We saw a little bit of a dip this week again, because something that's counteracting here is the regions that they're adding. So let me share that too. I'm gonna remove this real quick and do a new share.
You might want to just select that entire window rather than the tab.
Okay. Oh yeah. Picture layout. I don't know how to do that, but sorry.
Here, just start it over.
Okay. Let me just
hit present.
Stop screen. I'm gonna do it all over
present, again. Share screen.
Yeah.
Then you might
sorry, y'all.
Window.
Yeah, here we go.
Or you can hit entire screen.
Okay, so here's what we're seeing. You have these new regions that were added, and with zero progress, and like Brazil obviously has a 0.739% weight. It's the most heavily weighted region globally with zero progress. So it's pulling down our group project score, if you will.
And zero contributors.
So like you have all of these, if you sort by that, like look at all these regions that have zero progress that they've added. I get that we need to get these things mapped, but it's just, they keep adding these regions with no contributors. So I think there's two things that should happen here. One, after 2 weeks of no or 4 weeks or whatever.
I believe some of these smaller ones that have no contributors get deactivated after like a month. Is that correct?
They're supposed to, but I don't think they are. If they're being manually added, I don't think they're being removed.
And well, let me just add here, I'm still kind of not too happy with the fact that like there's certain metrics we don't see overall, like the global rewards. What is global map progress score?
Mm-hmm.
Whatever the acronym for it is, we don't have any visibility into that. We don't know how that's being impacted. We don't really have the metrics for what events have impacted contribution, because there are other factors in this, and it's really hard to root those out.
Yeah. We can see that progress is improving, right? We're at 19% of the world's roads. It's just that every time they add these new regions, think about it like this. It's like a group project where you have a student added to your team and they just don't do any work. It's like, that's frustrating. So that's kind of what we're looking at here now. And speaking with Gabe, he's like, well, all of these regions need to be mapped, and really they should have been, set out from the beginning. So here's what I think would be interesting. Because part of the problem here is that there are people that want to map in these regions that have orders that are just back ordered right now. So it's, part of this is supply constraints. But I would also like to see them bring back that one, honey per new mapped kilometer, but maybe not for all regions. Maybe if only the progress is below 30%, or something of that nature to really give us a reason to ship dash cams to these 0% regions. Because right now, like Chicago is 100%. I mean, we're having great progress. It makes a lot of sense to keep expanding here. But if we want to start getting progress in these other regions, I think we need a little bit more motivation. I would love to see, them incorporate something. And I think that would be a good way to do it. Bring back the one honey per, new kilometer, but only if the region progress is below a certain percentage to kind of get these things kickstarted. Because we need to start seeing these things mapped.
Can you sort by weight again with the highest locations? I mean, this is, to me, is ridiculous. That you have a reward or a location that just is all encompassing and has larger than any. These are the largest areas that are the way they've quantified what a location is. Mm-hmm. So that rewards pool is absolutely massive, and the few contributors there see substantially ridiculous rewards that week. It's an issue that we have no one mapping there, and they're sucking that much out of the global rewards pool.
My question though is like, how many? Because there's only 2% progress. So, I mean, I guess, does that mean that 0.541% of the global pool is being distributed between two people? Is that what that's saying?
Not exactly, because the way I understand it, that's the weight,
right?
So it's around that area of the global rewards pool, but the multiplier is what's going to multiply the weight before it's in that formula. So if you have a 3x multiplier, the weight becomes 3x, but and then those numbers are used to figure out what the percentage of the rewards that week that are divvied out to that region. I may not be explaining this correctly, though. My understanding might be a little bit skewed, but that's another one of my complaints, is that we don't have documentation right. There's been so many updates that the documentation is not on par. And for those of us who do try to understand the system, I might understand if I look deep enough in the Discord for the answers or ask the right people. But does it stick? Not all the time. And that's something for people like me and you. There's a lot of people who look towards us for these answers, and we try to be as objective and level-headed when speaking about this kind of these kind of metrics and events. It's hard to do. And with I think it was MIP 9 that allocated foundation funds to get some of these tools to for a grant for dashboard tools. That's great. It's going to be a little bit until we see them. They have to work specifically with the Hivemapper team, but we need these tools to understand what is taking place and explain it, and work, make suggestions accordingly. I think the Hivemapper team, they're open to suggestions to an extent. I get that they get bombarded with FUD and haters, and it's hard to care, when you're just constantly under scrutiny and going to get kicked no matter what you do, because certain people don't like it, rewards, blah blah blah. But there has to be some reasonable and productive conversation that takes place here, so at least they're willing to work with the community, and that's what we attempt to do on this podcast.
Yeah, I think a lot of the change has been good. I'm curious with these new regions that are being added. It is and obviously it's having an impact on the global progress, and these need to be mapped for sure. But yeah, look at this. I mean, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So like of the top 10, 7 of those regions are near 0% progress. So that is absolutely bringing down the global progress score. So, there's 500 people mapping in New York. There's 350 in Chicago, or Dallas rather, if you look at this. So, we need to get more dash cams in these areas. So how do you do it? Well, I think bringing back that, 1 honey per kilometer, while progress is super low is a good way to, motivate people to get dash cams in these areas. And I don't know, part of it is, again, because there's supply constraints. I'm sure people in these regions have ordered dash cams. They just don't have them yet.
Well, my thought is, and look, I could be wrong on this about the payouts, but I would assume these areas, the whole reason for activating a bunch of these areas to begin with was because there were people that were only relying on first time map. And now that you have area, you have a pool, a regional pool that you're rewarded out of. So I don't understand, like, if they're beneath a certain score, or if they wouldn't be getting payouts, or what exactly the deal is there. But with a region that has that significant of a weight, there shouldn't, in my opinion, if they're already getting payouts, no reason to have first time map. They're already getting enough tokens as it is with no contributors.
Well, there's 0 contributors, 1, 1, 1,
Yeah.
2 contributors. I mean, I do have some drivers down in South America, and I can say the rewards are far less than the rewards up here. So I don't know, man. I think
that maybe they have to hit a certain threshold before they're getting full rewards. Is that the case?
Well, yeah, like their progress is super low. So I don't know. I think we're, overall though, like I want to get back to this. Let me remove this. No, I do want to get back to the overall distribution here. So like, again, we are still seeing like pretty good progress coming back up here. The other thing to keep in mind though is there's more and more people mapping, so these are being split up more and more. So not only did we see the drop off, but we're seeing that pie, if you will, split up between more contributors. So they're going right now. If we think about this, like they're trying to go into production to have 200,000 bees manufactured a year. So if they do ship, if they hit that 200,000 bees next year, still have to sell them. That would be like roughly 10 times more mappers probably than we have right now. I bet we have roughly 20,000 people mapping, I think. So think about these distributions. If all of a sudden now there's 10 times more drivers, the rewards would drop off significantly. And I think that's part of what they're thinking about here is like, hey, if we keep these rewards too high, when we have 10 times more drivers, we're not going to be able to increase that weekly distribution. And then it's going to be too much of a drop off. So I think they're like, hey, let's reset the bar here and, tick back up to offset some of the fact that there's going to be so many more contributors. So, I get that. But again, I don't want to see this anymore. I don't want to see a 37% drop off. I would like to see, more frequent changes, more consistency week to week, because this can open up the door for so much FUD. And, we're seeing that already. But I will say this much, y'all. Like, I'm very bullish on this project. I'm excited about it. I just added 22 dash cams to my fleet this week. So like, I think there's a lot of potential here. And I think if you find the right type of driver, so, if you're on the road a lot and you drive during the day, not financial advice, but I would say it's worth looking into this project for sure. If you're not driving much, you can't tell me I see people complaining that they're driving 100 kilometers a week and they're like, how come I'm not making $500 a week anymore? It's like, that's ridiculous. That that makes no sense. It wasn't sustainable. We saw it for a short period of time after the Coinbase listing, but you can't tell me that makes sense on any level. So, I think things have come back down to earth a little bit. Now, I'm curious, Joe, like we've seen this broader market pullback. following the Bitcoin halving. I think this is something that's pretty normal. Have you changed your strategy overall, not just Hivemapper, but in general with, your crypto assets and your plays in the market?
Not necessarily. I'm kind of expecting, to an extent, what we're seeing. This is a weird market cycle because, for those, always not financial advice, but those of us who've been in crypto for years, the thought process is there's Bitcoins and then everything else is an altcoin. The market cycle, altcoins follow Bitcoin, and there's been the Bitcoin halving last month. Typically, it starts to pick up to go to a new all-time high, but never in history have we seen a all-time high before a halving. And you just wonder, how is that going to impact this market cycle? Is that going to draw in more attention and bring retail investors? Maybe. But I'm not sure this market cycle is going to be like the ones before. Everyone thinks it's just going to the moon because Bitcoin halving, and there's a lot of factors that go into this that I don't believe everyone totally understands. There's a lot more scrutiny on crypto as of now. There's a completely different overall global economic situation than that there was in the past. We don't know what's going to happen with regulation, but we've seen CZ was indicted, and I think it was recently sentenced. We've seen them crack down on SBF years ago. They're looking into these matters, and okay, they haven't made regulation yet. What they're waiting on is the discovery results from all these investigations and prosecutions, so they can bring that for us, Congress, for the rest of the world, whatever parliament, and say, we want to base the regulation and the laws around our findings here. In my opinion, I might be wrong, but I think that's typically how these situations play out.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I mean, we saw this early surge that we haven't seen in prior market cycles because of the Bitcoin ETFs. I mean, it is interesting. A bunch of banks, I mean, even Chase, JP Morgan Chase, let out that they took positions in Bitcoin ETFs, which is funny because, Jamie Dimon has talked shit on crypto forever. But anyway, they were just loading up their bags apparently. But we saw price action, increase way earlier in the market cycle, and I think we saw kind of like a mini premature bull run. And then the Bitcoin halving happens. And this is very normal. We see consolidation, some corrections leading up to, if history repeats itself, August, September going into election season is when things would really take off. Now, to your point, there are some differences this market cycle. Interest rates are way higher. Banking system's looking a little bit shaky with commercial real estate. We've had more regional banks fail over the last couple of weeks. Credit card debts at all-time highs. So we need retail to come into the space. I think it could still happen. My sentiment here is that they're going to try to juice the market a little bit going into election season. We could see interest rates drop a couple times towards the end of summer. I think that this presidential election is going to have a huge determining factor in what the market does, because in this last week, if you've been paying attention, not to get political here, but there's all the bills that are coming up that are, pro crypto are being heavily voted against by the Democrats, and Trump came out this week and fully endorsed crypto, which I thought was really interesting. So I think this presidential election and the outcome is going to have a major impact on where this market cycle goes. Even if no major changes are implemented, just from an optic standpoint, I think the market will react. My personal plan here, is I think I'm going to look to take profits a little earlier in the market cycle than I would in prior market cycles. So, in prior market cycles, I probably would have planned on middle of 2025 into 2025. I think this time around, And I'm not talking about cashing out my entire, position. Like I'm only in conviction plays that I believe in for the long run. But, when bull runs hit, things tend to get a little bit overvalued. And, taking a little bit of money off the table, you're not going to be mad at yourself later. Okay. So I'm looking at maybe Q4, Q1 to start taking more heavy profits than I would otherwise, still having a substantial bag to take advantage of a super cycle bull run if we see it. But I certainly think there's a possibility here. We could see a global market pullback in the traditional markets, which will impact everything sometime in 2025. And, you don't want to be, I can tell you from the last market cycle, you don't want to be overexposed. And it's up to you what you decide to do. I don't want to be overexposed. I've gone through this before where, it's fun to see prices go up and it's really easy to get greedy and think that it's going to continue happening forever, but it never has before. I don't think it's going to happen ever in the future. So, I'm going to be a lot more diligent about taking some profits on the way up, having some cash sidelined, and just be more cognizant of that in this market cycle and a little bit earlier than I would otherwise, just because of these global factors that we just talked about. Things are a little bit more shaky than they have been previously.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there. It's hard to say what's going to take place. And this whole ETF deal has, in the minds of the average person, legitimized at least Bitcoin, maybe we'll see some other cryptos come along. But when you have these institutional, the financial institutions that offer investment portfolios and management to the everyday individual, and they're getting these requests for Bitcoin because although the most volatile, it's also one of the, if not the best performing asset. And there's going to be offerings from your competition. Well, now it forces your hand to make that offering. Now it's legitimized in the eyes of people because the banks, who are regulated by the government, can now offer it for you to invest in, or at least have part of your portfolio. And it just the toothpaste is out of the tube. And I believe, in a sense, it's a good thing. But yeah, the banks might not like it because they want to control the monetary system. But they have to. They have to. They have to. I don't have the word I want to use here, but make that offering and give up their position on it overall.
Well, the banks hate it. I mean, obviously, it's competition for them. So, I think we're going to see, with the reckless fiscal policy that we've seen, I think we're going to see gold, silver, Bitcoin do very well looking forward. Here's what's different, though, with these Bitcoin ETFs as opposed to other market cycles is I don't think you're going to see the same type of profit taking. A lot of these people in the Bitcoin ETFs are putting maybe a small percentage of their retirement in Bitcoin for the long run. I don't think you're going to see the same type of volatility with those specific holders. Now, there's a lot of, from an optics standpoint, there are psychological levels that retail comes in at. So I wouldn't be surprised. We have a huge crypto conference at the end of the month, Consensus down in Austin. I'll be there. Super excited about that. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a nice pump coming out of that, off the wings of that conference down there. And if we see Bitcoin hit, 70, 80, 90, that $100,000 mark, all of a sudden, psychologically, you could see retail start to pile in. And then what you normally see is people start to take profits off of that, and it goes into altcoin. You have alt season. I would love for that to happen. I hope it does happen. That's what happened in prior market cycles, and things get fun. But I do think we could absolutely continue to see this sideways chop action, some even further corrections potentially, leading up to towards the end of summer. And it's funny because when the market's up, I feel like everyone always says, "Oh, I wish we could have some corrections to add to our bags." And then those corrections come, and everyone's too scared to add to their bags.
Yeah.
Right? So
that's exactly it.
It's funny, man. I did. I mean, I've added full disclosure, not financial advice, I've added to my GeoNet bag. I have big fleets with Demo and Hivemapper, so I'm always adding to my bags with those every week. So I have been adding to my conviction plays through this last dip to get a lower, average cost of entry for my conviction plays. It's hard to do. It's easy to say that you're going to do it. It's hard to do it when the market's down and everyone's super negative on it. But I mean, look, you and I were both, I was, building through the bear market.
Mm-hmm.
That's the time to do it. Right. So, I think this is almost a gift in a way to have some extra time, to find your plays, do your research and figure out what you want to do. But I've certainly been taking advantage of the opportunity myself.
One of the things that I will say, and we say this is not financial advice, but if there's one statement I would stand by here is that if this is your first go around with crypto, I would not be making bets that you cannot take losses on.
Afford to lose.
As that. What's that?
Yeah. Yes.
No matter how good
you're right. It's a high risk market. There's lots of upside.
There's always upside, but there's plenty of downside. And I know people want to get in and start these big fleets and start work with all these projects and spend all this money, and they're going to take out of their savings to do it, or it's, God forbid, finance of their house or something on it.
Yeah.
Don't do it. Don't do it. Start small. Maybe if you want to build a fleet, you want to get that experience, 4 or 5 devices, maybe 10 if you want. It's still that you get to see how much of a hassle it is, all the variables, it's just such a time sink dealing with all the devices and the hosts, the different projects, keeping up to date on them, managing that. And if you have a massive footprint, a massive operation, and you're not aware of what it takes to run something like this, it's not going to be a fun time. It's not going to be something that, next cycle I can just recover. Might not happen. And during these, when this crypto market performs well, everyone's a genius. Just as in stocks, everyone's smart. Everyone's a great investor. They're a great builder, a great leader, a tremendous developer, all that. And then when everything cools off and we see even a downturn or a correction, in the minds of everyone else, it's not doing good. There's negative sentiment or non-confidence in the project, and the list goes on. What many people who are just coming to crypto don't understand is that this is not like traditional finance. It's not like the price of a stock where that is directly correlated to the evaluation of the company and the confidence in its performance and operation. Is just not. There are too many factors, some of which I believe are manipulated, that go into these cycles, the market, and prices of a particular cryptocurrency or the cryptocurrency market overall, that you can't explain. And this is kind of something I tell people who they come to me and they're well versed in investing and managing their own portfolio, and I just tell them, you're not actually going to make any sound bets if you're going off of lot. I don't know if I should, but I tell them, you can't really even treat this as an investment. You got to hedge your bets in a way that you protect yourself and understand that this is kind of a gamble from your perspective. That's how I tell savvy investors. Like, I can tell you all about a project. I can tell you how it sounds technically, and here's the leadership and blah, blah, blah. But that might not actually explain why the price is fluctuating and that it's going to actually be a success. And look at all the crappy altcoins, all these pointless meme coins that for whatever reason are performing, that have these Ponzi-nomic type of schemes built into them. So I always give people that disclaimer that if you get held up in this emotionally, you're doomed.
Yeah, look, I mean, the stock market, though, there's some wild valuations there. We've seen more fluctuation there, too. I think there's certainly nefarious stuff that happens there, too, just to a lesser extent. But, I mean, I'll say this much. As far as, like you mentioned, starting your fleet, I mean, I don't want to think with anyone else's pocket. I mean, there are people that have high risk tolerance, that have a lot more capital to deploy. I think you need to figure out for your own self, like, if you're putting money in that you're relying on that to make ends meet, that's you're probably in over your skis a little bit. So I wouldn't spread yourself thin. Just be cognizant of your risk tolerance. This is a risky environment, but at the same time, like there's a ton of upside too if you play your cards right. But you also can't look at valuations the same way you do the stock market, right? Your valuations in this industry are way more out of whack compared to revenue. That's because it's an emerging technology, right? So people are kind of betting on the future and what the potential is, as opposed to your traditional stock market. So, keep that in mind as well. And I won't speak to the meme coins. Like you can ride that wave, you can get lucky. I don't play in that space much. I've been fortunate with a couple of plays in there, but I tend to go after the projects that I think have actual utility and the potential to have real revenue through the door. That's my personal play, but it's an exciting space, man. I mean, just be aware of the downside risk, because with that upside potential does come more risk than traditional investments. Yeah. So MIP 15, by the way, so I did put a video on that too. I mean, we're seeing token burns with getting back to Hivemapper here a little bit. We've seen some substantial token burns. So that's exciting. That means revenue is coming through the door. I mean, ultimately, this project's going to succeed. They have to be selling the data on the back end. Like, it's great to collect the data, but if you're not selling it, it doesn't matter. So I think that's one of the things that's exciting is, there you go. Thank you. Look, 2 weeks, 3 weeks in a row now, pretty sizable token burns. That's good for this project, especially because there's 10 billion tokens in the total supply. So anything that can reduce that supply would be good. I predict, and I did this in MIP 14 video, like they're going to have to change MIP 15 over time, because as it stands right now, 75% of revenue goes to token burns. I think that they're going to have to shift that in favor of consumption rewards over time, where the data you're collecting, if it's getting purchased, you'll get honey rewards based on that. That's the way this thing gets self-sufficient, and I think that we will see that happen over time. But it is exciting to see a working product and revenue coming in. That's one of the biggest critiques that this project has gotten recently. We have to remember we're still early in this, y'all. I mean, compared to like a Helium got to a crazy $6 billion market cap. Yeah. I think they were bringing in like $3,000 a month in revenue, at the peak of the last bull run. So, so very speculative in that case. I think that, we're seeing real revenue here, which is exciting. I think, as they get more products and develop more back-end APIs for these customers, we'll hopefully continue to see that trend. If we do, then we're in a really good place. And, as long as they continue to ship dash cams, and if we can start to get some of these regions that are at 0%, moving in the right direction, that'd be a good thing. So overall, look, I think there's a lot of FUD right now, but there's a lot to be excited about, there's really there's a handful of very loud people spreading the FUD. And to me, not to go on too much of a rant here, but I've been involved in projects in the past where at the very beginning, I was super excited. I became disenfranchised, and then I moved on and focused on the projects I was excited about. In this, there's so many opportunities here. There's a select few people that seem to continue spending every minute of their day, focused on fudding this project, which is really strange to me. But it's like, if you don't like it, then I would move on and focus on other projects, because there's a lot of opportunity for you. It doesn't make sense to me, but I guess people can spend their time how they want.
Yeah. No, I get it, because look, when I was, so invested time-wise, I not necessarily monetarily, but just having this attachment to a certain network, that at one point I looked at all their decisions and governance from a actual professional standpoint, just seeing how ridiculous and my thoughts on helium. I mean, I think it is a disaster and really just a way to siphon money from all these sales. They're not the product they're offering is a joke, in my opinion, from both networks. It is what it is, but I understand why a certain person who was that invested in this in the beginning feels like that. But also some of the grievances are just way extreme and obsessive. And yeah, at one point you just gotta move on to something else. You can't cry about it forever and start making personal attacks. Now, there's always going to be that, especially like these Facebook groups, the Reddit. Eventually we'll start seeing a lot of complaining in there, and it turns into a massive cesspool. That's just in nature. So I try to ignore it and present the current events and situation from an objective manner. And we talk about what we believe should receive constructive criticism, but there's certain things that are often misinterpreted that they don't deserve to be labeled as ill-intended or you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think a lot of these projects can be a victim of their own success because we see this in bull runs where I don't think helium expected to go from 15,000 hotspots to nearly 1 million in 18 months. I mean, like that's the type of growth you can see with these DePIN projects, especially bull run, and then you have the compounding event of people getting into it for the wrong reasons. There are people that at one point in time with helium, people were plugging a box into their wall and making $10,000 a month. I mean, that's not sustainable. And I think a lot of people got in without doing the research, realizing that as more people got hotspots, that those rewards would be split up. If you did your projections back when there was 15,000 and you looked out, like you would see those rewards were going to drop significantly. So I think, people buy into the hype, don't do research, get into these projects thinking that with unrealistic expectations, and then they're sadly disappointed later on, and that just adds a lot of FUD. And then when you have market corrections, it really can turn into a really bad thing. That not to say like helium made some major missteps, but I think they were kind of the pioneers in a lot of this, so that's going to happen.
And from that standpoint, you remind me of what it was like back in those days, where you have people who I had a couple people come to me saying, I want to start a business based on this. This is my current order. These are my plans. And I showed them what I'm basing future projections on when it comes to the rewards, and how as more hotspots come online, we'll see, that sharing of rewards. So overall decrease, ran the numbers on what it would actually cost to host at these locations, that inform them that like every crazy market cycle with this mania and the sugar rush comes to an end. And for some of these people trying to convince them otherwise, or that their plan was, it was very risky and potentially not well thought out, they weren't considering the downside to it. There was no convincing them otherwise. Really, I've had a couple of those people come back to me and say, I wish I would have listened because you were right. I just thought that, you didn't believe, or you had some personal grievance, you didn't have ambition, whatever. And no, I don't talk just to talk, although it might seem like it. What I'm getting at here is from Ariel's perspective, and from what we're seeing with this, people's their own personal reasons for participating when it comes to unrealistic expectations for rewards. I can see why he wanted to just just bring that to an end immediately. Put an end to like this. I'm going to jump in because I think it makes a ton of money, and we're going to do, go to the moon and blah blah blah.
Yeah,
I can appreciate it from one standpoint, but from another, it's that's a very risky move, and that does shake confidence. And anytime you do a tokenomics adjustment midway through, you're going to piss off a lot of people. And that's really been my advice to the Hivemapper team is when you do this, try to avoid pissing off everyone all at once.
Yeah, I get it. And I think raising the bar on the different regional progress scores is necessary over time. Okay. Adding new regions is necessary over time. So I think that has to happen. It's just, okay, how drastic of a change do they make at a time? I think over time they need to figure out a way to do this so it's the global reward distributions don't take such a hit in such a short period of time. Again, though, with the active versus passive mapping thing, you're not going to be able to control market conditions. So like, don't make changes based on the price of honey and with the thought of preventing active mapping, because we could, if we get into this bull run, we could have this happen again. And, I think you need to be really, really careful about the changes you make, because in crypto, the market is so volatile. So if you're making changes based on market conditions, it's not going to be a good thing. And they say they're not, and fine. But again, if their goal is to prevent active mapping, then I just don't believe it. They have to be taking market conditions into consideration then. But look, again, I think this is a really exciting project, y'all. I think that there's so many good things that are happening, and I think they're being overshadowed by some of the negativity in the community right now. But like, I'm very happy with my fleet performance. If you're the right type of driver, and if you want to build out a fleet, whatever, if you do this the right way, I think there's a lot of potential here. But you need to do your own research. You really need to dive in. You can't go into this willy-nilly. Like you really need to understand what you're getting into. But I'm really excited about this project.
Yeah.
And
one thing I did want to mention on MIP 14, I know. Let's just, for the sake of argument, say that this wasn't attributed to rewards, and based on what I've seen, I'm not certain it's about active versus passive mapping MIP 14 in particular. And I think a lot of some of the stuff that we're seeing with these reward decreases are to be, they're based on other events that took place, other changes that took place, mainly the constant adding of regions to the map. But I don't think that MIP 14 was really, I don't think it had a very drastic impact on many regions, because it's, we've seen some regions that are just always at 100%, and a few that you can never really get to even 30% or 40%. I think it corrected some in a way, but the overall weight that these factors went into that go into the regional progress score. I hate that word progress, because it's not a it doesn't represent or characterize what the actual metric measures.
Just say region grade. I just say region grade. Yeah.
But if you're looking at I need to pull up the formula.
There's a lot that
goes into it.
They moved for activity. They moved it from 30% to 75% on total kilometers every week. I mean, there's a huge jump there. They expected. So think about this as the region grade and the curve. It was 16% of the regions were hitting 100% on that metric. After that change, they expected that to drop to 4%. I mean, that's a big change.
It is, yeah. You're absolutely correct. But I want to know specifically from their standpoint, why they're believing that the current regional progress scores are not, the metrics are not well representative of what they're trying to attain for a sustainable map. And when you look at the regional progress score, the 60% weighting for coverage, 30% weighting for activity, and 10% for resilience, and 14, the MIP 14 only increases coverage by 5 percentage points. So now we're up to contributors will need to refresh 20% of unique kilometers every 28 days. That's not very hard to attain whatsoever. The activity, which, what did I say that accounts for? That is 30% of the overall score. Contributors would need to submit 75% as many total kilometers every week as there are road kilometers in the region. And yes, that's a big leap, but only for 30% of the, of the overall score. I'm not sure that many of these regions are taking such a substantial hit if they're being mapped in a productive way, or if they're not a corner case scenario for their geographic or landscape type of makeup. But we're not really able to understand what the intentions are of the Hivemapper team, because we're not privy to these discussions and we don't really get the cliff notes in many cases.
Well, their goal, I mean, I put this together for my last video, right? So these are the 3 different categories that the region grade is scored on. There's 60% weight on coverage. That's the majority of the grade, then the activity and the resilience. So, this coverage is how many unique kilometers are mapped in a region over a 28-day period as a percentage of the total kilometers. So if you had 15% before, you scored 100%, they moved that to 20%. So a small increase. But, if you look at the expected impact, 10% of the regions were hitting 100%. They expected that, jump to drop it or cut it in half to 5% of the regions hitting 100%. Their goal, is to ultimately get this to 100%. But, they have to kind of balance this with the amount of dash cams that are getting shipped out to these regions. So they can't just go to 100% now. No one would be able to attain that, right? So I understand what they're trying to do. This activity one, though, jumping from 30 to 75%, like on the requirement, that's a huge jump. And, that 16% of the regions were hitting 100%. Now it's down to 4%. So that to me is too big of a jump. And maybe this is a indicator that they looking back, they think they should have adjusted this sooner. And that's why they made such a drastic change. And maybe they'll do more frequent changes moving forward. I don't know. But obviously, like, we do need to get 100% on all of these different factors. That's the ultimate goal here. And there is going to constantly be a balance of, how many contributors are there, how many dash cams have shipped, to kind of balance these calculations to ultimately get to 100%. So let's see here. So it says this Nick just asked this question. As time goes, it sounds like you agree that as time goes on, reward distribution needs to change to encourage more better mapping coverage. If so, when would the ideal timeline be? So that's the question, right? Look, right now, they are targeting, they call it the curve, right? So you look at these different metrics that each region's graded on. They're trying to target 5% of the regions hitting 100% and continue adjusting the curve up as more dash cams ship to keep it at 5%. I question whether that's the right figure. And whether that should be 6, 7, 8%. I think they need to run some different scenarios, and there are going to be some adjustments moving forward. But I think there needs to be kind of this trigger, whether 5% is the right number or a higher number, to where once too many regions are and continue raising the bar. And the reason why I say that is, if you're looking at the amount of tokens that were distributed following this change, it dropped down to like 4 million tokens distributed. At that run rate, it would take like 20 years to distribute all the tokens associated with, these different metrics, right, that go out every week. That seems like a really long time to me. And I think that consumption rewards tied to revenue should become a much larger percentage of what's distributed to participants over time. So, to Nick's question, I don't think anyone has the silver bullet or the perfect answer right now. But I do think they need to run some scenarios that potentially looking at, making that curve a little bit more achievable to a higher percentage of the regions. Maybe 5% is a little bit too drastic. Maybe they need to look at 6 or 7%. The main thing, though, main takeaway I have here is, more frequent changes, less, volatility week to week on distribution. That's what I would like to see moving forward. And then I think we'll kind of figure out what that perfect number is. The other problem here, though, is like market conditions. Obviously, if the price of honey was 3 times what it is right now, there'd be a lot less people upset. So market conditions have obviously, magnified the change, if you will. So, that's one thing that no one can have control over. And I think, this kind of comes into the sense of, okay, how would you, do you feel good about the project in the long term? If you're looking to get into this just to map for 6 months and think that you're going to retire, I don't think that's very realistic. If you believe in the team and you think that, yes, there's going to be some bumps along the way, we're in an early stage project, but the long term, this is something you want to be involved in, that's a whole different scenario. And that's where I stand with this is like, hey, I think there's short-term, upside for sure, but I believe in the longer term execution, and if we look at the token unlocks from the team, they still have another 1.5 years of token unlocks. So I know a lot of these people are like, oh, they're pulling the rug on this project. It's like, that doesn't make any sense to me because they still have 1.5 years of token unlocks. And in working with the team directly and speaking with them, like they're obviously working around the clock with this project. Like Ariel has been in mapping for like 30 plus years. Like this is like his baby. He wants this thing to succeed. So I know that some of the things he says, some of the things he does, sometimes people take it the wrong way. But I do believe that the team is committed to it. So over time, I think it'll work itself out. And I would just like to see less drastic changes, I guess, is my main takeaway. Long-winded takeaway.
Yeah, I'm going to share something as I believe it relates. We got an update from Gabe on 4/10/2024. Better region boundaries are coming to Europe. Since launch, Hivemapper define European regions at the NUTS 3 level, which has resulted in tiny little regions that results in many small transactions instead of a few larger ones. It makes the Explorer map confusing and doesn't line up well with how customers buy map data either. There is work underway to redraw the boundaries at the NUTS 2 level, which will result in fewer, larger regions. After updating the countries that utilize the NUTS classification, we will likely revisit boundaries for any other parts of the world that have small, fragmented regions. And overall, I think this is good. It's easier to have that. I don't want to say one size fits all, but to come up with some sort of system or grading system based on metrics and have less corner case scenarios, less oddities when you have a greater inclusion of different regions, etc. Have more to work with. Hard to explain. Distributed systems are not easy whatsoever. It's very hard to get down. And I can say that from experience.
Yeah.
Especially when you've never done them before.
Yeah. I mean, but look at this. Like we're at 19% of the world's roads mapped. Like it's been 1.5 years. That's freaking nuts. I mean, that's really cool. And the fact that there's revenue coming in, like there's so much to be excited about. And I just think so many people's expectations got reset when the Coinbase listing happened, that there's just FUD everywhere. But stay the course. If you look at last year, I had a sizable fleet. Most of last year I was at like 55 vehicles in my fleet, and honey was sitting at like 1.5 cents for a long time. And I had a lot of drivers that were, it was hard to keep them motivated. And some of them were like, I don't think it's worth it. And they gave their cameras back. And guess what? The market started to move in the opposite direction. And I had some of them text me. And they're like, hey, I wish I had continued mapping. Can I get my camera back? I'm like, it's placed with another driver now. Like, I don't know what to tell you. So, staying the course and staying consistent can pay off, but it just, there's no guarantees here. Right. So, you do your research. Have you heard of any specific companies buying this data? Curious. So this is a good question. They haven't announced the companies. They're under NDA with a lot of them. Also, one thing that Ariel said in our interview with him that we posted last week, there are some competitors, and he's like, well, I don't necessarily want to tell our competitors who we're working with. They have mentioned they're working with some like Fortune 15, I think, or Fortune 10 companies. So I don't know I'm not sure who their contracts are with. I know that there was some talk that there was maybe some homeowners insurance companies that, wanted to see updated imagery of people's lawns and how well they keep up their houses. I don't know if that's something that has come through or not, but we can see now with the token burns that there's revenue coming in. I mean, that's the huge change that gives us visibility into it at least. So I think the fact there's revenue coming in is the main thing, but I am curious because I think if they named a couple of big name customers, that would be really interesting for sure. I think the market would react to that.
And I agree with, not announcing any partnerships until the ink is dry and we know it's going to work out, because if it doesn't go through, it's never ending amount of FUD from the community. And we've seen it before, but also I'll tell you what, I get real sick of hearing in this space that there's, I'll elaborate on Hivemapper, but you hear from every other crypto project around that big names, we got big partnerships coming, we have deals, blah, 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 all under non-disclosure. We can't disclose that, but it's coming, big names, big partnerships. Well, in this case, you actually get to see, you don't get to hear the names or who it is, but there's data usage. Someone's purchasing it. We can see it based on the metrics and based on the honey that hits our wallets for map consumption. So that's enough to satisfy me. I'm happy with it.
Yeah.
But anyone else in the crypto space who says big partnerships under non-disclosure, I don't believe it. Don't believe it till you see it.
And unless we're seeing, in this case, seeing the token burns, I think is huge. I mean, that's the main takeaway. Hey, I do want to talk about one project real quick. And it's called Teleport. So they're launching an Uber and Lyft competitor. I'm working with their team a little bit. They're going to be launching Austin, Texas. It's their first big city. They did College Station in Texas already. So it's going to coincide with Consensus, which is pretty cool. And one of the things with Uber and Lyft, they've doubled their rates in the last 5 years. So if you use Uber and Lyft, you probably realized or seen that as a consumer. But they're taking 50, 60% of the fare in most cases. So what Teleport's doing is they're basically cutting out the high overhead of the Uber and Lyfts. The driver's getting 85% of the fare, and the consumer's getting a lower price point. So, if you do participate in these early, you get these points that you can use to acquire NFTs that can be purchased and sold in the secondary market. Now, they haven't officially launched a token or anything of that nature. So I don't know. I have to assume at some point they would. I don't know that they will for sure. But, other projects that have done this, NFT holders have gotten airdrops when tokens launch. So that might be where this is going. I don't know that for a fact, but I do know that, by participating, you can acquire NFTs that will have market value. So kind of something that I would, I'll share my code in the comments here, but I'm going to put out some content on that because I think it's a pretty cool concept. That the rideshare market has needed disruption for a long time. So I'm pretty excited that they're going to be launching. It's only available on iPhone right now, though. They're adding Android support pretty soon here, but super excited about that project, and it's a DePIN project as well.
Anything else? Anything else that you want to discuss, or viewers, if there's questions you have, topic that you think should be covered, let us know.
Do you have any other projects you're looking at? Obviously, I like GeoNet a lot. I've talked about them. Demo, I'm huge. I have over 200 vehicles in my Demo fleet. I love that project as well. But are there any other projects you're eyeing? I know you've been to XNet, right?
Yeah, I'm really. I got to make a couple XNet videos after this, actually, but I think they've got some good stuff going on. We'll see what takes place on the CBRS side. Can't say I'm entirely too confident in what they're doing there, but they've already started lining up these Wi-Fi offload partnerships, and currently they're using an aggregator, so partnership isn't the correct term for certain data transfer that they have, but they're working on partnerships, which I think they're going to get a couple of big ones pretty easily. So there's usage in that project as well, and it's so we'll see. I'm
Right on.
like what they're doing.
But yeah, Silencio is another one. Silencio is free to download. So that one's pretty cool. You can just like measure noise pollution. It's actually, I was looking into the noise pollution market. It's a lot bigger than I realized. So they have over, I think, a couple 100,000 contributors now, I believe. So that's been pretty good. So
I'm curious to know what the market is for noise pollution and why they actually care.
Yeah, so I think in Europe it's really big, but I think like real estate developers for one, it's really big, and there's a lot of like government entities now that are really paying attention into noise pollution levels. So I don't know. I looked it up. It's a pretty sizable market, like total addressable market revenue wise. I need to dig in more on like the actual consumer side of it.
What always makes no sense to me on these type of projects is, well, number one, I don't want an app on my phone. I don't want to have apps on my phone with like, very well-known required applications to begin with, or well-known companies, because you don't know what they're collecting to begin with, and they do collect data on you. You don't know what Silencio is collecting. I certainly don't trust a crypto project around that when it comes to developing an app that's actually secure to begin with, and not snoop. Also, if it's collecting stuff from a cell phone standpoint, you're not really getting a good indicator of the noise pollution when these people have it. Most of the time it's indoors, or they're driving around in their car. It's skewed towards personal experience and most of what that individual is doing at any given time. So how do they know that what they're collecting is actually a data set that is representative of noise pollution that is not generated on an individual basis and but basically overheard more significantly because it travels with that individual? If you had some sort of system that was some sort of device that was actually calibrated across the board in the same manner all the time to place outside in a location that has to meet specific requirements, I could kind of bite off on that. But
yeah, I mean, you think as they have larger sample sizes in certain areas, they can certainly remove the outliers. But I don't know, man. They've gotten a lot of participation. I think it's interesting, and it's free. And if you don't think your other apps are listening to you, I mean, you're out of your mind.
I know they are.
every app, so they might as well get compensated for it. Let's see here. Demo's distribution model. Do you think it'll eventually be based on the amount of usable? Yeah, so it is. So the issuance today is called baseline issuance. There's X amount of tokens distributed weekly. There's a 15% reduction every year. Those are just for being connected, but we're already starting to see distribution also on top of that weekly based on revenue coming in the door. So overall, over time, more and more of the weekly distribution will be revenue tied. Baseline issuance will continue to decrease over time because there's over 80,000 vehicles now connected to the Demo network. So they're also seeing pretty large growth. But yeah, it should and it will eventually be based on usable vehicle data submitted. So that's a good question. As far as security laws go, yeah, it's interesting. We'll have to see what happens. I have listened to some interviews that seem to think that DePIN projects are nothing super safe, I guess, from legislation these days, because the government seems to be coming after crypto. But I've seen a lot of interviews that state that DePIN they think has a better chance to avoid being classified as a security compared to a lot of other projects. We'll see what happens there. But I do think we still are ways away from any strict regulation coming down because it takes a lot of time for them to sort that stuff out. And there's a lot of open, lawsuits or I guess court cases going on right now to kind of get this sorted out. I think Gary Gensler has failed all of us miserably in his job to give us real clarity, unfortunately. So I'd love to see him get ousted and get someone else in there. Not a huge fan of him, considering he was doing, crypto courses at, MIT for years in full support of it, and then all of a sudden changed his stance. But either way, we need more clarity there. So it'll be interesting to see what happens moving forward. Baseline issues, same for DB. Well, the baseline issuance is dependent on how you connect your vehicle. So, if you connect with your software, you're going to get less than if you connect with a macaron versus if you connect with an AutoPi. So that's just baseline issuance. If there are, and if there's data or revenue coming in tied to charging patterns specific to EVs, then those EVs would then get those rewards that are tied to that revenue. Yeah, so the baseline issuance is really just tied not specifically to the type of vehicle, more so the connection type. The revenue coming in that the rewards distributed to that will be based on the specific type of data collected. But like charging patterns, very important. There's a lot of companies really interested in EV charging patterns for sure. Like I have my ribbing connected to Demo, and I'm sure that they are very interested in charging patterns because I think we all know the infrastructure is not adequate right now for the EV goals that we have set forth. So I think that's going to be a really important data point. Any other questions before we cut out of here? Appreciate you all coming on Mother's Day. Hopefully you wished all the mothers in your life happy Mother's Day on a Sunday nonetheless. All right.
I got nothing.
Right on. Well, if anyone's at Consensus, would love to connect. I'm excited to get out there at the end of the month and get to do some research, do some networking, meet some people in the community. It'll be awesome.
Are you going to the helium meetup here in Chicago?
I got to look at the date on that. I'm not sure. I'm going to there's a Demo sponsored happy hour at Consensus that I'm going to. So super excited about that. I don't know if I can make it. I have a lot of travel coming up here over the next month or so. So we'll see.
Yeah, I hear you. Same here. I have so many projects that are taking place right now that I really haven't had the opportunity or the motivation to make a video. So.
Right on. Well, I've got some content planned. I'm going to do some on teleport. I'm also going to do one on active versus passively mapping for Hivemapper and give my thoughts there. We talked about a lot of it today, but yeah, y'all, look, I'm super excited about Hivemapper. I think overall things are moving in the right direction. If global progress continues, if revenue trends continue, we are doing the right things. There's going to be some bumps in the road. So, you have to be open to a little bit of volatility. There might be some, misses by the team here or there, but I think they have the best interest of the projects in mind. I don't think there's anything nefarious going on, regardless of what you see out there in the community. But if you're the right type of driver, I think it's worth looking into for sure. I'm expanding my fleet. I'm super excited about it. I've been very happy with my fleet build out and my involvement in this project. And there's a lot of projects that are super exciting in this space for sure. But I do appreciate you all joining today.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Happy Mother's Day. And we will have our next stream here on DePIN Connections channel, noon Eastern time, United States, May 26th. 2 weeks from now, we do the stream every other weekend. And as always, appreciate you watching. Thank you, everyone. Have a great week.